G'day guys, welcome back to Living with BC. I'm Ben. Today we're going to have a chat about how I wrote my first book. This is it here, The White Owl by B.D. Connor. That's me. So let's get stuck in. Before we begin, I took the liberty of picking up a bottle of this. Writer's Tears. Get it? Because I'm a writer. I cried a lot writing this book. So now I can enjoy some writer's tears. Let's see how it goes. I don't know why. Does anyone know why Irish whiskey, this is Irish whiskey, they don't have corks? They've all got like screw tops. I don't really know why. That'll do. That'll do. Oh, this looks good. I don't know, what are you supposed to look for? Like, it smells like whiskey. I never like pick out characteristics that they talk about, like, ooh, like a burst of apple followed by citrus with a milky finish and then vanilla aftertaste. I'm like, nah, just tastes like whiskey. I mean, some taste better than others, but I don't really break it down all that much. Anyway, let's get into it. How I wrote my first book. Look, I always liked reading since I was a young kid, and I liked writing. I liked making up stories. It was always fun. I don't know. I had a pretty active imagination. Like I just random things just pop into my head, and like it would be like sitting here, and what if a bird flew through the window? It's like, then it's stuck here. Like, would it spray glass in my eye? And then it's stuck here. I've got the door shut, so I'm going to have to try and scoop it up and throw it outside. What if it's hurt? What if it dies? I don't know. All these weird things, right? And then once in a while, a good idea comes into my head instead of just dumb ones, and I write a story about them. So there's that. Like this, the White Owl, I actually originally called it the Blind Owl and the Sword of Gold for a few different reasons, but I knew that I wanted a gold sword in there. There had to be a gold sword, only one of them. I didn't want like a whole army to have gold swords or anything. I wanted it to be very specific and kind of be like a banner to flock to. Obviously, it couldn't be real gold because it wouldn't make a very efficient weapon and would be ridiculously too heavy to carry around. So then it's kind of like, okay, well, where did the gold come from? If it's not just regular gold, then what sort of gold is it, and what's special about it? Who wields this sword? Is it the Sword of Kings? Is it a prince or a princess? Does it have to be a certain bloodline? Is it going to be like a farm boy and sort of Luke Skywalker style? He's going to pick up the sword and go on these grand adventures. And it's just effectively like it's me asking myself a bunch of questions, like, who is this person? What is this object? Where did it come from? What's it used for? And then it kind of snowballs from there. Pretty similar with characters. I knew from the very beginning I wanted Aiden to be, I pronounce his name Aiden. I wanted him to be, your typical kind of unattainable Superman sort of hero. He's hardworking, he's honourable, he's courageous. He'd sacrifice his life to save his friends. Man of the people, if you will. I knew I wanted him to be like that. And I've had a lot of comments that Aiden's very square-jawed and unrelatable because of that, which I'm okay with, because then I wanted to play around with the characters around him, potentially having corruption in human emotions and the way they go about things, and does that sort of chip away at his strong facade over time, or is he still resilient? And that's something I'm really interested to explore. Likewise, kind of equally on the other side of the coin, I love hearing that people can relate to all the other characters in the book, and they find them really easy to relate to and empathize with. And not so much their goals that they're trying to achieve, but maybe the steps they take to achieve them is what makes them more villainous. They're not. And that's something that I'm like, yes, boom, hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I was going for. So I'm really happy when people say that. So that's a huge part of it, is obviously just taking one thing, Like for me, it was Aiden. Who is he? You know, what's important about him, and the sword, and like obviously he gets the sword. If you haven't read that, like he gets the sword. Um, and you know what's important about that? Why does he get the sword? What's he going to do with the sword? You know, why does it sort of come to him? Like I said, is he the prince or is he not? And sort of playing with all those ideas, and obviously you don't want to sort of be too cliche in that kind of, like how I mentioned, the farm boy type thing. But you also don't want it to be too predictable with, like, you know, he's just the heir and it's going to come to him. So it's really just like asking a question after a question after a question, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That kind of goes into the actual mechanics of writing the book. I'm very much a plotter. They talk about plotters and pantsers. Pantsers fly by the seat of their pants and plotters map things out. Obviously no one is 100% one or the other, but I'm definitely more skewed towards plotting. I usually try and outline the book and try and see where I want it to go. Obviously it's fluid and it's going to change, and you know, the first draft to the final draft are two completely different books. And even now, as I'm writing book 2, as I'm writing chapters, I know I'm going to change certain things. So it's never necessarily going to stay the same. But for me, I need to try and map that out as much as possible from start to end and what happens in between. Usually writing about maybe 100 words or so of a paragraph per chapter. So I know that in chapter 10, this is going to happen, and I want these sorts of emotions to be felt, and I want this, you know, to pull on people's heartstrings here, or I want to make people angry there, or whatever it might be. Set out to do that just to remind myself, because, you know, I'm constantly getting ideas, and if I don't sort of write those things down at the beginning, then I'm just, my initial idea would never come to fruition. I'm always going to be, you know, the new idea will kind of take over because that's what's current in my mind. In regards to character names, that was pretty easy. Like, I knew that Arranmore was going to be a Scottish-Irish kind of, you know, based civilization. And Riordan is kind of like a traditional English-based civilization. So I pretty much just Googled baby names. Yeah, for me, I literally just, you know, it was ancient Scottish names, ancient Irish names, to try and have them a little bit older rather than things that are sort of current spelling and things like that. And then just go from there, try out some traditional surnames. It's funny, actually, there's a review on my book. I'll link the Goodreads webpage so you can have a look and have a read if you want. It's got mixed reviews, which is fine. And this one review gave 2 stars, so they weren't very impressed with it, which is fine. They, you know, have their own opinion. But they accused me of stealing names from, or almost plagiarizing from Tolkien with the names of a lot of things. I'm just like, mate, I literally Googled Scottish baby names, and that's how I found Aiden. And Bridget was another typical sort of name. You know, just have a look through it. You'll find these names in, you know, in baby lists. It's not hard. Which then goes on to the point of names for locations. So I'll bring up my map. All right. So bring that up. If we go over, like, we'll play around Arranmore over here. Dunrobin was the first place that I had mapped out, and that was the one name that I was sort of stuck in my head. And I knew that it just sort of sounded sort of Scottishy, Irishy, like Dunrobin. I don't know, it just kind of stuck with me. And I guess I just sort of play around with like a bit of a Scottish accent, and they all kind of play somewhat in that kind of thing. Like, I can imagine finding places like Rebley or Dallyford, in, you know, Camden Bar. Rivermouth is obviously just a bit of a fun, same as the Pine Woods and the Pebbles. They're both just kind of fun ones, but a lot of them, you know, just sort of gave me the sense of like a Scotland or Ireland. And likewise, like if we move over to Riordan here, Riordan again just sort of popped into my head, but places like Rutherford, Westgate, Beaufort, Green Hills, Holmesglen, like I imagine those to be, if you found little hamlets in the countryside of England that similar sounding places would be there. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of room on the map. I'd have to make it way too big. And the book already is a larger size than normal to fit the map so that it is readable in that format. There's definitely like a number of places that are mentioned that are left out, just small villages and hamlets and things like that I can't fit in because it would be way too many. So unfortunately there. But if we then circle down to Capia, sort of starts roughly along here. These are all just regions. So, again, I just kind of thought of like ancient Rome, similar sort of sounding names like, Tubri or Stratoria, Vatigos, Lapidonia. I could imagine them to sound like they are in, the countryside of Italy there. And that's kind of, effectively where it comes from. In regards to the map, I drew that myself. So that, like, the graphic of it was drawn up by an artist, but it went off my rough sketch. So, man of many talents. That's really it. I mean, it's a pretty simple simple enough to describe. Obviously, it's a long process, and there's lots of things that go into it behind the scenes, but that's pretty much it. It's just kind of like asking questions of what is this and what do I want the idea. There's got to be some sort of conflict, obviously, because while it might be fun and exciting, if Aiden just had the sword and then nothing else happened, you're like, okay, cool, but why would you want to sit and read about that? So manufacturing some sort of conflict, and then also trying to make that realistic. So that's something that's always a challenge. That reading a lot is always helpful. Writing a lot is helpful. You throw a lot in the trash. Like the amount of things I deleted, the amount of scraps that I'd written notes on that just all got tossed up and thrown in the bin just because they just weren't good ideas to what I wanted. So, it's definitely sort of trial and error in that sense. I don't know if anyone else is out there who's a writer who has different ideas and approaches things differently, especially if they're pantsers. That's quite different to me. Like I mentioned before, I like to plot things out, so that's always a unique take on things. Well, to be honest, guys, that's kind of all I've got for you. Unless people want very specific questions, if you do, throw a comment in the comment section. I'll try and get back to you. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. As always, stay cool.